We're live. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to QuaranCon Cubed, our continuing content series of interviews that so far have all been authors. And today we are talking to the inimitable JC Kang, who has written a whole lot of books in a really awesome world. And I think that the all-encompassing series title is Legends of Tuvara, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So the Legends of Tuvara series, but that follows multiple characters in different eras and stuff. So there's a lot going on. It's a very deeply built world, and it's really cool. I have read 4 of the books in that universe so far.
I'm honored that you've actually read them.
Yeah, and I read them a while ago, and I really enjoyed them. And then I have been meaning to get back into that universe for ages, but my TBR list keeps growing, and I keep having to shuffle things around.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. But seriously good stuff that I thoroughly enjoyed back when I was reading it, and that I absolutely recommend to everybody watching this interview. It's worth checking out, and there's a link to all of JC's works in the description. And that'll just take you to his body of work on Amazon. And if you would like to find it elsewhere, is your stuff available wide, at least for print?
For print, yes.
Yeah.
But everything is like Kindle Unlimited,
right?
Amazon exclusive.
Yeah. Okay. So readers who have Kindle Unlimited, rejoice! You can read everything as part of your subscription. And readers who don't have Kindle Unlimited, you will either have to buy ebook copies from Amazon, or you can go find print copies from your favorite indie bookseller, because those are available. Just look it up by the name and author. Okay. So gosh, there's so much good stuff to talk about with JC. We've got lots of exciting things to discuss, and I am just trying to manage my windows here. But it's hard to decide where to start, because there's so many cool things. I have been trying with these interviews to not talk too much about writing the entire time, to delve into other aspects of people's lives. And one of the big things that you and I have in common, John, is that we have both lived in Japan, and okay, I like that's one of the things we have a few things in common, but so I want to start
women.
There. Huh?
I said we're both women. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, you tell me. I will accept whatever you say. But living in Japan was, I don't know, it's a big formative part of my life. And I
have to agree. I mean, my year in Japan, that was my first year out of college. I did the JET program.
Yeah.
And it was huge, just in terms of, being out on my own for the first time, and in a foreign culture. So it was definitely a very big part of my life.
Yeah.
I lived in Ibaraki Prefecture, which is northeast of Tokyo, maybe about an hour away by train.
Cool.
And it's the countryside. Basically, there are rice fields on the way to my little town. Actually, they called it it's a city, but it only had about 30,000 people in it. And I guess that's just the way they incorporate things in Japan.
Yeah.
Now, the city I lived in, while I was there, merged with another city. And so it became an even bigger city, which is still smaller than
most cities in Japan.
So, by Japanese standards, it's tiny. I mean, geez, Tokyo and Osaka are ginormous.
Yeah.
I was basically in the countryside, but I lived right on the coast. I had an apartment that overlooked the ocean. It was just absolutely amazing. Yeah. And it was like probably one of the best years of my life.
Yay, that's exciting. Is that the only time you lived in Japan, or
I've been back and forth.
Yeah.
I lived for 1 year, but then because my wife is Japanese, I've gone back, and I've stayed for the longest time was about a month and a half.
Okay.
And then sometimes I'll go back for a couple weeks. But in terms of actually living, probably that was the only time I would say I lived in Japan.
Nice.
Had a bank account in Japan. So
is that where you met your wife, or did you meet her
elsewhere? No, actually, I met my wife in Taiwan, and we used to only speak Mandarin to each other.
Oh my gosh.
But since we've been married for 20 years now, and so
congratulations.
We speak mostly English. Yeah, right. We speak mostly English here in the U.S. If I speak Japanese, she's usually correcting it, so sometimes I try not to speak Japanese.
And your daughters speak Japanese and Mandarin and English, or just English, or what do they?
So what they speak and what they understand are kind of like two different things.
Right. Yeah.
So my older daughter, she actually speaks Japanese fairly well, not as good. She's 16,
Yeah.
and she speaks decent Japanese, not well enough to actually live there on her own or anything like that, but decently, and she understands it pretty well.
Yeah.
The younger one understands it pretty well, but won't speak it.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, when she was a baby, I was speaking to her in Mandarin, but my Mandarin isn't great. So, and then she doesn't really speak any of it anymore. So
okay.
I don't understand it. Just like little words here and there.
Yeah.
Their big thing lately, they've just totally gotten into anime, just very sudden. It's like, oh my God. I was never into anime myself, but they are totally into these like boys swimming team anime things, or like just crazy stuff. And so I'm hoping their Japanese will improve by watching that.
It certainly helped my Japanese back at the start watching, I didn't watch a ton of anime. I watched a lot of Japanese dramas but I found it
definitely
useful.
I was in Japan. I watched mostly baseball because I could watch it and understand. So I knew all the things like, oh, that means strikeout.
That's cool.
Anyway, that's sunshine. So anyway, but then later, my wife and I, we used to watch like the samurai dramas together, the Taiga drama, the one, the year-long ones, and so started speaking like a 1600 like samurai. So.
Like the NHK version of the 1600s.
Yes, exactly.
That's so cool. Awesome. Well, that's super fun. I always like to nerd out about linguistics and languages in general. And like I was a Spanish teacher for a long time, and I'm teaching my daughter Spanish, or rather, I speak to my daughter in Spanish a lot, and she understands a ton and only speaks a little bit. Because not a ton of other people around her speak Spanish. So, but we have a couple of friends from certain parts of Central and South America who also speak to her in Spanish, and that gets her to speak more because she's like, oh, it's not just my weird parents that do this thing, but it's also other people in the world. Anyway,
one of the cool things about language, especially your native language, they were doing a study in Japan. This is actually when I was living in Japan. I read an article where they were exposing Japanese babies to the difference between R and L, because there isn't really an R or an L sound in Japan. And so they would basically see the baby's attention span. So they keep on making the R sound until the baby got bored. And then they switch in the L sound. And then the baby would like, oh, and sort of react to it. So that's where they could tell, okay, up to a certain age, basically it was 6 months, where they could differentiate between the R and L sound.
Nice.
Before their own native tongue took over. But what we've noticed, for example, like even though my kids don't speak very much Japanese, they actually, when they do, they have good accents. They don't sound like a foreigner trying to speak. Well, with vocabulary, yes, they sound like a foreigner trying to speak Japanese. But sound-wise, in terms of accent, they sound better than I do. So
yeah, it's amazing what just like talking to a baby in certain languages will do. And I remember learning that in some of my early linguistics classes at Georgetown, and being like, oh, well, that's neat. I'm totally, if I ever have a child, I'm just going to speak to them a bunch of like whatever language I can pronounce decently. I'm going to go ahead and throw at them. And sure enough, like my husband and I both speak Spanish, Japanese, and German to varying degrees.
Wow.
And so we tried to throw a lot of those at her when she was really little, in the hopes that, if she ever decides to learn them, she'll hopefully be able to form the sounds. But like our Japanese used to be pretty good, but it's like we've both slipped a lot because it's been 10 years now since we lived there, or 9 anyway. And our, like, I used to be fully bilingual in Spanish, but now I'm like, just competent.
My second language is actually French. I didn't even start learning Chinese until I was 19.
Oh, nice.
But I started French when I was in 4th grade because they had this pilot program where they wanted to have kids like learn basic aspects of French. And it's kind of embarrassing, but I was a French major. Not that it's bad to study French, but the fact that I spent 14 years learning French and can't really speak it anymore.
It would come back, I bet.
And the other embarrassing thing is I chose French as a major because I had a crush on this Belgian girl who spoke French. But
that actually is embarrassing. But it's not embarrassing to forget a language through disuse. It is embarrassing to study something just to impress someone. No, that's fine. Whatever.
I did impress her.
It did. It worked. Nice.
But the other thing being was that I was taking a linguistics class as well, and it's really interesting because back then, our brains, we only hear certain sounds and we try to imitate them the best we can, but
Yeah.
we imitate it. We don't quite get it exactly correctly. But if you take a linguistics class for a specific language, a phonetics class, then you really will, like, this is how you need to put your mouth in order to make this sound. And then all of a sudden the world's different. It's like, wow, I didn't even know, number one, that sound was different from what I was making. And number two, that I can make that sound now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Human brains are fascinating, and our acquisition and reproduction of language is also really fascinating. And that's why I studied Spanish linguistics in university, because I found it really fascinating. Not a super useful degree, but it could have been if I'd gone into to interpreting or translation, which I did very briefly and loved, but then moved to Japan, and then that was less useful. And by the time I got back, the easiest way for me to get hired was as a Spanish teacher. But yeah. But anyway, that stuff.
I do think that linguistics, doing linguistics teaches you how to think about languages as well. So to be, if you're going to teach Spanish, it gives you a whole new insight. This is how I can teach Spanish as a non-native speaker.
Yeah.
And how native speakers learn it. Like, for example, we have these Chinese schools in my hometown. Actually, every place has a Chinese school, and they try to use like native textbooks to teach kids. And it's just like, these kids, you can't use a native textbook to teach a kid because they're coming at it from a totally different angle. I think having that linguistics background can definitely help if you're going into teaching.
Yeah.
Plus, it's cool things to talk about, like on Zoom or if you're drinking. So.
I found it really useful for distractions in class, because students would ask about like irregulars, right? Like everyone always is like, why is this irregular? And to be able to answer that and be like, well, okay, so let's talk history for a bit. And it's always fun that like the answers tend to be steeped in like, okay, well, so like this country conquered this country, and then they conquered each other back. They were fighting over this piece of land. So all of these words are actually like based in Arabic instead of Latin. And then also like these Latinate words, like the most commonly used ones are the ones that tend to be irregular, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, just like having answers to those questions was super fun for me, because those were questions I asked my high school Spanish teachers, and they didn't always have an answer. I had one teacher who was really good about that stuff. She had more information, but
and then we have English, right? I mean, they say that English, like there's that meme, English doesn't borrow from other words, it corners them in dark alleys and robs it for spare like grammar. So that's totally
I mean, English is it has as many problems as colonialism, really. Like and I think it's really interesting the way that language reflects culture in that way, and reflects the history of a culture. And so, like there's a lot going on with English. Also, I think interesting is the fact that while a number of other languages have updated their spellings and stuff in the last few hundred years, right? Spanish did an update in like the I can't remember if it was the 1300s or the 1600s. They were like, okay, we got to start spelling stuff differently. Oh no, France did in the 1300s. Spain did it in the 1600s, something like that. And then, but like English never has. So we're using like Middle English spellings and modern English pronunciation, and that is really hard for people who are learning how to read.
You have two things that they should look like they're the same, like a prow and a bow, or a bow and a bow for that matter. It's like,
Anyway, so language, funny old thing. But so cool that you also lived in Japan, and and that was formative for you. How long did you live in Taiwan? I didn't realize you lived in Taiwan for a while.
I was there for 3 years.
Oh, cool. Was that before or after Japan?
That was right after Japan. What happened was that my fourth year of college, I studied French, but that was my second major, and my first major was foreign affairs. Going back to the French part, I did try to I tried to triple major in Asian studies, because I'm kind of a born again Asian. I was totally uninterested in being Asian. I was a total banana growing up. But in my second year of college, a banana yellow on the outside, white on the inside.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Twinkie is the other term, a little more artificial. So when I was in second year of college, all of a sudden, actually what happened was my father went and told us our family history, like where do we come from? And that was the first time I ever had this idea, oh, wow, I'm Chinese. So I was growing up playing with toys made in Taiwan, never knowing that my father had lived in Taiwan at one time. So back then, basically, I switched over to Asian studies, but I didn't actually declare a major because I finished most of the French requirements.
Okay.
So I tried to declare a triple major, but the university wouldn't let me. So I
Mm.
basically have a triple major, but one of the other ones foreign affairs.
Oh,
This
cool.
is a long-winded answer. So
Fine.
fourth
We
year,
got time.
fourth year of college, I took the foreign service exam and I missed the cutoff point by 2 questions out of 300. No, best thing that ever happened to me. Actually,
Okay.
failures have been the best things that have ever happened. Not all the failures, but some of the failures have been the best things that have ever happened to me. Because looking at foreign relations now, thank God I wasn't in that. Main thing being was that all of a sudden my fourth year, I was always the sort of person who was like, I know what I'm going to do, and this is what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, at the sort of middle of the end of my fourth year, I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I applied for a scholarship to study Chinese in Taiwan. And I also applied for the JET program. And I really wanted to go to Taiwan. I didn't really want to go to Japan. I wanted to go to Taiwan, but I heard from JET first. The JET deadline came. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do JET. Which was good because I saved up a ton of money, because that was when the yen went as low as 80 yen to $1. And I was just like, that was at the end of my time there, and I'd saved all my money. I was like, I was rolling it down. Well, as much as anyone can.
Right.
So then afterwards, I went just straight to Taiwan, because that's where I really wanted to go.
Nice. Wow, that's so cool. And so in Taiwan, you were there as a student, or ish?
Ish. I mean, officially, my visa would say I was there as a student, but I was only going to be there for 3 months. But then I found my Wing Chun Kung Fu teacher, and so yeah, what happened was that when I was in high school, I had always wanted to learn Wing Chun because that's what Bruce Lee did. And also I had learned Mantis and I had learned Tai Chi when I was like young and didn't appreciate them, but I had a friend in high school who did Wing Chun, and then that's what I wanted to do. So my first week in Taiwan, I found an article. There's an article in the English language newspaper about a Wing Chun teacher. I was like, okay, I'm there. So I went there, and just turned out he was the nephew of Yip Man, the movie Yip Man.
Yeah.
His nephew of Yip Man, and so I didn't know this for the first 3 months I was there. Anyway, I just, because I found him, I ended up staying. What was supposed to be 3 months ended up being like a full 3 years.
Wow, that's so cool.
So my main reason for being in Taiwan was the Wing Chun, and the secondary reason was the language. The third reason would have been, that's when I started also learning acupuncture as well.
Oh, sweet.
Because, my father, being like an immigrant, he wanted us to become doctors. And so he always, while I was in Taiwan, he said, why don't you go learn acupuncture? I was like, oh God, he just won't give up on this. And so one of my Kung Fu brothers was apprenticing under a master there, an acupuncture master. So I went with him and just started to really enjoy it.
Oh, cool.
Then, one of the other things was that the Wong Fei-hung movies came out around that time, actually beforehand, but that's Jet Li, his early movies where he plays the folk hero Wong Fei-hung. And he was a Chinese medicine doctor and a very famous Hung Gar practitioner. And so I remember at that time thinking, martial arts is my love, but there's no way to really make a living off that unless you have to teach a bunch of little kids, which isn't going to happen. So I went and figured, okay, I can go move forward with acupuncture. So while I was in Taiwan, that's where I pretty much decided that's when I was going to be an acupuncturist.
Nice. That's so awesome. Oh man, I have so many questions about acupuncture, but I feel like I should just go do some research instead of bombarding you with them, because that's like,
hey, I'm here.
I know, but like I feel like I'm like getting either like questions that I'm sure Google could answer for me, or that I'd be like asking you to do your work in the middle of an interview. But
you can pay me, number one, and number two, Google's not always right. So
well, yes, I'm sure that's true. Question. Okay, so about this is an actual question about acupuncture, because I am curious. I'm actually considering seeking out acupuncture treatment in Winnipeg. It's covered under our health insurance, and I would there's a lot of stuff that's been going on lately that I feel like I could benefit from it. But actually, this is the thing. So do you feel like acupuncture is more appropriate for physical concerns or emotional, mental concerns, or is it holistic enough that it's like, no, it addresses all of that?
Yes. So, yeah, all the above. I mean, Chinese medicine doesn't necessarily separate the physical from the mental. Like people who are in long-term chronic pain will start having, well, even not necessarily long-term pain, but even short-term pain will have like a mental reaction to it, right? And people can feel depression physically as well. So we see them as being interconnected.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, perfectly, like, that's the reasonable response to that. So that makes sense.
So Homicide. So for your homicidal tendencies, by all means, try acupuncture.
Try acupuncture. Just to, maybe if your knee stops hurting, you'll stop wanting to kill people.
Exactly.
Yeah, fair. Speaking of which, that leads me actually very well into my next question, which is, what is your favorite way to kill a character? Speaking of homicidal maniacs.
I saw that because you've sent me this question. That was the one I was just staring at, like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I can't even think of the different ways I've killed characters before. Beheadings. There have been like magical disasters. So I can't think of a favorite way. So.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, it is kind of a weird thing to like be like, I really like doing this, but
that's why I was getting my homicidal. Anyway, that's my question too.
Yeah, well, I think the nice thing about being an author is you get to embrace some of our like your more negative fantasies sometimes, if you want to just be like, well, this person has really angered me, and now I'm going to kill them in fiction as a form of catharsis.
Well, it's interesting. My latest read was Everybody Lies, and it's a book that basically he's an economist, statistician. Try to say that fast 3 times. He goes and looks at Google searches to see what are people really searching for, and so he's come up to conclusions about race, economics, all kinds of interesting things. But I imagine that authors might really skew his
really, yeah. Certainly, I don't look up different ways of people dying for my own personal enjoyment, but I do I do look it up for books often enough.
Yeah, sure. We'll just stick with that. Wink, wink. How about that knee pain?
Huh?
I said, how about that knee pain?
How about that knee pain? Yeah, right. Back to that. Okay, well, so you have no preferred method of offing characters. Fair enough.
I actually, now that I think about it, the one that I kept on thinking about was a beheading. Yeah. And I actually pulled it from the character's point of view, where he gets his head lopped off. It's a villain, minor character.
Yeah. I think I remember that scene.
Yeah, he gets his comeuppance after 3 books. And so describe how his head swirls, and so the world spins around him, and there's like excruciating pain from top to bottom, and all. That was kind of interesting to write.
Did you look that up? Did you look that up? Like,
well, no. What was interesting? Oh, well, okay. Now I'm trying to see if I come off as being a psychotic or not, or sociopath. But this was at the time when ISIS was beheading people, and so I just read an article from an expert about what does it feel like to be beheaded, and so, well, that's how that ended up in the book.
So you did.
I knew he was going to be beheaded, but that much detail, that was because of that article.
Gotcha.
I didn't actively search it out.
So it's actually like a person would maintain consciousness long enough to experience that before they finally.
Right, but it's very short amount of time. I mean, they talked about during the French Revolution, when during beheadings, that they would hold the head up so they could see their headless body. But I guess you could never get feedback from the person because they don't have lungs to push through the vocal cords. But I guess they knew that the person was still alive. I think that you are technically, after beheading, you're still alive for a short amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, it would take your brain as long as it takes your brain to shut down without oxygen and blood, right? Like, so
4 minutes. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a fun thing to think about.
More pleasant subject.
Hey, here's a warm fuzzy question to ask after that one. If you could choose any fantasy animal companion, what would it be and why?
So I was trying to figure this one out too. And so I think it really depends on, is it a familiar where I can sense through them, or is it just more like a sidekick?
You decide. You tell me if what appeals to you more and what would be.
A dragon. For just a plain pet, but I don't know if dragons. That's one thing, I don't actually believe dragons should ever be a pet. I mean, I think that in any kind of fantasy world building, a dragon is just far superior to humans, and if anything, we're their pets. So let's mix the dragon thing. Okay. I have to go with dog. I mean, to me, do you hear that? That's my dog shaking his. So I'd have to go with dogs because they're faithful. They can help you find things, and
and loyal and loving.
It's so uninteresting, right? For a fantasy author, you'd think I have like a list of cool mystical animals, but
I mean, how many humans have close personal experience with a phoenix or a dryad, or a dryad shouldn't be a pet because that's mostly
sentient being.
Sentient being, but so is a phoenix, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of why I phrase it as animal companion, because it could just be like, this is your buddy. This is the person that's a four-legged person or a winged person or whatever that's accompanying you on your adventures. Because pet, I feel like, is not really the right term for most cool fantasy creatures. You'd be like, well, no, that's clearly that thing could kill me and just like run off if they wanted to. So it's got to be an equal partnership, which is why I think dragon would still be on the table, because you could just be like, no, this is my adventure buddy, giant dragon person who has very kindly not incinerated me lately. And
exactly. I'd like a dragon who could take human form, because that's a pretty common trope in fantasy. So
yeah,
my buddy, my traveling companion is a dragon disguised as a human.
Nice. A dragon disguised as a dog would really take people by surprise.
Even better. Have you ever seen that the meme? They have the cat that's sitting on a bench, like he's sitting on an awning, and
That's a solid one. Yeah. Yeah, totally. That would actually, and a cat would be far more like a likely thing for a dragon to do. But actually, I think that's why a dragon choosing to masquerade as a dog would be really funny. People would be losing their hands left, right, and center, and like, why? I was just trying to pet the dog, and like, and now you don't have an arm anymore. Anyway, I think those are excellent options for animal sidekicks, or not sidekicks, but companions. Yeah, you would probably be the sidekick if it were a dragon. I would probably be the sidekick if it were a dragon. My daughter is coming to ask me a question, so give me a second. Hello.
Mom, my arms are getting tired from holding it.
Grab a pillow.
I think I need to hold it on something.
Yep. Sorry. Can you take a pillow and or multiple pillows? Use that, please. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I am solo parenting. I have resorted to screen time to make this happen, but
been there, done that. Many a time.
Yeah. Yeah, but there were technical questions. Okay, so speaking of dogs and as fantasy companions, the next question actually is I was Facebook stalking you, as I do for everyone in these interviews so far. And I saw that it looks like you once had maybe a small dog, maybe a Jack Russell. You also currently have another dog, I think, or maybe it's the same one.
Same dog. Sometimes I posted pictures of my mom's dog. Sometimes it was a beagle.
Oh, okay.
But definitely not a small dog. That dog was fat. So, but we have a rat terrier, which sometimes people will mistake them as being a Jack Russell.
Gotcha.
Cool. Yeah, very similar to, actually fairly similar to Jack Russells in personality, except they have an off switch. Like if you sit down, they'll jump in your lap and just sort of take a nap, versus a Jack Russell will like, play.
Yeah. Let me chase a rat.
Yeah, mine does not chase rats. He's a rat terrier, and they're famous for rats. But I partially got him because of my gardening. I had a mole problem, like little field mice, and they would eat my vegetables and drive me nuts. I was like, you know what? A rat terrier, they're into digging up rats.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not at all.
Not at all. He does find baby bunny nests and dig them out and kill little bunnies. So yeah, he's done that twice.
Although the baby bunnies will also destroy things, but
yes, exactly. But yeah, we actually he found another bunny nest last week, but my wife she saved the bunnies.
Oh, nice. Oh man. Yeah, I've never had a terrier, but I have known some terriers, and I was on a trip once with a terrier that just straight up launched itself at some domestic chickens while we were at this other person's house, and totally was like just dragging one around in its mouth, and its neck was all. But it turned out the chicken was feigning its own death, which is a thing that they often do. I had read about that, but I'd never seen it before, and so I was like, no, that chicken's not faking. That chicken is dead. But like 5 minutes later, the terrier abandoned it. It was like lying like that in the road, and we watched, and suddenly the chicken like looked around. We'd taken the terrier inside, and the chicken was like, got up and ran off. Like, nicely played, chicken. Yeah, that was terrifying. But yeah, terriers, they can be vicious. They're very efficient killers of things, because that's what they were bred for.
Mine is generally the only thing he's efficient at killing is like yogurt leftovers, and
Nice.
And
Well, you know,
defenseless baby bunnies. That's about it. So he's chased a lot. He's chased an adult, rabbit around the yard, never caught it. He's chased like squirrels, never caught one. Like, he's generally a very lazy dog. The only thing he gets interested in is balls. Like if you throw a tennis ball in the air, he just goes nuts.
Nice. Well, that's good.
And he's very good at catching it.
Excellent. How old is he?
He must be 9 now,
Okay.
because we got him in 2013 from a shelter. He was about 2. So yeah.
Aw, nice.
Yeah. Actually, it's his birthday tomorrow. No, tomorrow.
Day after tomorrow. Happy dog birthday to him. What's his name?
Snickers.
Snickers. Happy birthday, Snickers.
I didn't name him. I wouldn't have named him Snickers, but it's good.
So you say, John, but you certainly let him be named Snickers, didn't you?
We just, he responded to Snickers because that's what
that was his name. Oh, okay.
So like, okay.
That's cool.
Snickers
hey, my childhood cat was named Buffy, and I totally named her. But in my defense, I was 3, and I thought all cats were named Buffy because my grandmother's cats were always named Buffy. It was like Buffy the first, and that one died, and then Buffy the second, and that one died.
So here's a funny story. We also had a cat named Buffy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was growing up, because he was buff colored. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a much better reason. Like I legit just thought you had to name a cat Buffy.
He was slaying vampires too. So
nice. I wish that was. I kind of wish I'd had that impetus for it, but I was 3, and it was before even the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I it's way too soon. No, it was just what I thought you had to do, being 3. But that cat she could have been a vampire slayer. She was definitely a slayer of mice and birds and many other things.
Cats are very good at that.
Very good at that, yes. And we didn't know, like this was before we knew the impact that house cats were having on wild populations of birds and stuff. So she was just an outdoor cat her whole life, and she, anyway, I could go on, but Buffy was great. I loved her to death, and I regret her name, but that's it. Everything else about her was wonderful. So Snickers is great. That's wonderful. Okay, I think I've reached the point in the questions now where we actually get to talk about books. So how many books are there currently in the Legends of Tuvara series, and how many have yet to be written?
So there's the Dragon Song Saga, which is 4 books plus 4 full-length novels plus 1 novella.
Right.
There is Masters of Deception, which is the series starter for a 4-book series, of which there's only 1 right now. There's Crown of the Sundered Empire, which is also the start of a novel series, which there's only 1, but there should be 4 total.
Okay.
And they all intermesh with each other chronologically. So book 1 of Dragon Songs and book 2 of Dragon Songs is sort of it bookends 3 of the books. So
okay.
So they intertwine with each other if people want to read that way. So
gotcha.
Yeah. And then besides that, I have a 6 novella series, a 6-part novella series, which takes place before Dragon Songs.
Right.
And then a couple of short stories are out there.
Sweet. That is a lot of books in a single universe. Do you ever feel like you are going to write outside of that universe, or is that universe so big for you to play in that you can write all the stories you want to tell in that universe?
So the universe is big. So
yeah.
The way I place Earth within that universe. And so for example, I started writing a rom-com at one point, and there are Easter eggs inside the rom-com that are connected to the fantasy world.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I am currently working on a cyberpunk mashup with Xianxia, the progression fantasy cyberpunk. So that's set in future Earth. So they're everything is somewhat interrelated. Let's just say that.
That's cool.
And I have another idea for a book. So I have a lot of ideas for books, and some which I never get to. And I have another one that's kind of based on the novella series, but set in a different world and sort of a different magic system.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. It seems like in that case, you really can kind of write whatever you want in that universe, and therefore hopefully get a lot of crossover in readership there. I know I find issues with reader crossover in genre, but I think, you know, like I feel like maybe people who would be like, oh no, I only read fantasy, I don't read rom-coms, would be like, but this rom-com is set in the fantasy world universe that I like. Therefore, even though it's not a fantasy technically, they might enjoy it anyway, just for those Easter eggs, right?
If I ever finish writing it, and that's a hard sell because it was set in 2007, and I think we are getting a little too far away from that to get some of the references to 2007 culture or what was happening in 2007. But if I ever get to it, I don't know if I would target it to the same audience anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe they would want to read it, but maybe they would not.
Yeah. I mean, they're always, you gotta love the fans that are like, I'm gonna read everything written by this author, and therefore they will absolutely read.
And we love those fans.
Yes, so much. Those fans are the best. So you have trained in more than one martial art, and you have studied acupuncture, and you practice acupuncture, and you instruct martial arts. How much? Well, first of all, which martial arts have you studied? Because I want to ask that.
So when I was 10, I started learning Tai Chi, so Yang style Tai Chi, and also Southern Mantis.
Okay.
And then I took a big break. I guess I was dabbling around with like Taekwondo at the time because that's what all my friends were learning.
Sure.
And then I lived in Japan, and so when I lived in Japan, actually in college, I guess I was doing a mishmash of various martial arts, but not really formally. But then when I lived in Japan, I took Shotoji Kempo for a year while I was there. Got the Shodan.
Nice.
Not
the year. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, the mentality there is different. It's like sort of like you get your black belt, and that means here in the U.S., you're black belt. You're the man. You kick ass. But versus Japan, it's like you're a black belt. This means you can actually start learning something.
Right. Yeah. It's like you have your basics. That's what. Yeah. Even my instructor in Arizona used to say that. He's like, you get your Shodan, and that just means now you have a base to build on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, in Japan I did that. I also had a Tai Chi teacher in Japan doing Chun Tai Chi. And then after that, I moved to Taiwan where I did mostly Wing Chun. Cool. But then I was kind of a hothead back then and liked to spar, and I got my butt handed to me by one guy who, what did he do? He did Western boxing, and so because of that, I went to learn like Western boxing. I didn't do a whole lot of it, but learning basic combinations, basic technique, how to throw a punch correctly. Like what I really hate, I shouldn't say hate, but what really just grates on me is sometimes you'll see these videos like, how do you stop a boxing hook? And so they have this person who throws this like wild haymaker.
Telegraphed, yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, that's not how you throw a hook, you know? And it's like, if you start with that as your basis for how you're going to stop a hook, you're not going to be able to stop a hook.
Right.
So, and most likely the person's not going to lead with hook. So I learned Western boxing because I felt that, especially in this modern day and age, you need and so I should preface this by also saying this was around 1995, 96. So UFC was just sort of taking root. Mixed martial arts wasn't already, sort of as widespread as it is now. But back then, when I was Taiwan, I dabbled in boxing, some Brazilian jiu-jitsu. When I came back to the U.S., I started teaching more because I wanted to keep up my Wing Chun practice. So I started teaching my brother and a bunch of his friends. And his girlfriend was a BJJ girl. And so she basically, I learned stuff from her. She was actually both boxing and BJJ. And so I even have her teach, now she teaches like my kids boxing.
Yeah.
So I learned things, not necessarily formally and from a school format, but I did learn that. Cool. Some Filipino stick fighting. A lot of different things.
That's neat. Okay, so then the follow-up question to that, now knowing the body of martial arts that you've studied, which is vast, which is cool.
Dabbling. So you can't say it's vast. I mean, it's pricking the surface of most things.
But still having even a light experience with lots of different martial arts, I feel like it can be super useful and then the question that's following this is how does that inform your writing? Like how often do you pull on that experience to inform your writing when you're writing fight scenes or anything else? And I was also going to ask the same question about acupuncture and how and whether that winds up in your writing as well.
Okay. So with fighting, I mean, fight choreography, when I first started writing, I used to write these really detailed fight scenes, like, oh, the person threw the punch and he caught the fist, he twisted it, he withdrew the knife, he went. So it got very technical. And then my first, critique partners were like, this is boring. Like, oh. So I think actually knowing martial arts was not very handy for actually writing, except for spacing. So for example, if you have like you're fighting somebody here, or you're not all of a sudden from his right side to his left side, you have to kind of describe it like it's from your protagonist gets from one side to the other.
Yeah.
But I tend not to go in as much detail anymore, just because I think it does tend to get a little overwhelming and boring, and people who don't practice martial arts don't necessarily follow it.
Right.
But I think in terms of, once again, spacing, if you have multiple people attacking, just sort of knowing where everyone is at any given time and what is physically possible. So that happens.
Yeah.
As for acupuncture, I do have a Chinese medicine doctor in actually my new cyberpunk story I do.
Oh, yeah.
And the magic system is based off the Chinese medicine aspects, the 5 elements in yin and yang. But inside the Dragon Song Saga, there is a doctor character who does practice acupuncture and does acupuncture on the main character.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I knew about the character in Dragon Song. That's really neat that it's part of the cyberpunk magic system, though. That's pretty sweet. I don't know, as a reader, I always love encountering that kind of stuff and finding if I even recognize it, right? Because it's not necessarily a huge part of my experience, and therefore I might miss some of those references. But when I see it, I really like all of that, because I find it a really cool and fun part of world building to sort of inspire fantasy elements with actual real world practices. And it makes me, I don't know. I feel like it adds a level of depth to world building that I personally enjoy. And anyway, that's not to say that things that are just completely fabricated aren't also really cool. but I don't know. I like that. I like knowing what things are informed by. So, wow, we've actually covered a lot of my questions in those answers. So now I'm trying to skim through to figure out what I should actually ask next. Just to ask one sort of final-ish question about your actual writing. It sounds like maybe no, but do you have any plans to ever write outside of the universe that's sort of encompassed by Legends of Tomorrow?
Well, not outside the universe per
Right.
se, but outside of the planet, wherever all the stories take place. Yes.
Okay. So off planet, but still in the
Off planet, yes. Out of universe.
Okay, sweet. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay, and now I think I'm back to asking random questions. So, is there anything that you would like to add about your books? I mean, I feel like I want to tell people that I have really enjoyed your books because of the world building, because I find the characters really interesting and rich and complex. There are a lot of cool, badass fighters, both male and female, and I always love that. There are also a lot of non-fighters who are awesome, who are strategists or who are other, and this is, I'm really just
manipulators.
Manipulators. There's a lot of cool political intrigue that I like. And so certainly with the Dragon Song Saga, I highly recommend for people who like that level of epic fantasy with all those different pieces. You have lots of POV characters doing different things and then seeing how it all meets up at the end. And my impression of your series that follows GA, the Thorn of the Night Blossoms books, is that that's a bit of more sort of assassins and courtesans type.
So a rogue type of story. I mean, essentially they are the equivalent of what I guess would be a ninja clan, a spy clan, that does do assassinations. And so it sort of, it was originally supposed to be a really short story, 5,000 word short story. And then just like the first one just blew up.
Yeah.
And the readers of the first one kind of like, I left it open-ended and they're like, what happens next? So I wrote a second one and left a way to stop there if I wanted to, but people were like, what happens next? And so it just kept on growing and growing. But it's essentially, I sometimes call it, what if Memoirs of a Geisha had ninjas in it?
Right.
So,
Sweet.
and elves, sorry, half elves and so, but it's essentially, it's a little bit of Kushiel's Dart, if you've ever read that, Jacqueline Carey's
I
book, where
actually
they
haven't
have,
read it. It's been on my list for ages. I think I even own a copy, but I haven't read it yet.
so it's a bit of that, the sort of the idea that prostitution in this particular district is considered to be a very noble profession. So it's a little different from like the back alley
Yeah.
seedy places. So took a little elements from Jacqueline Carey's work, a little bit from Ryan Kirk's Nightblade. Sort of had these ideas. Well, anyway, for creating that sort of setting.
Cool.
There's one that was in the Dragon Songs that was mentioned on, and there are a few scenes that happen there. And so I did have people like, what happens in this place?
Right.
Well, I haven't thought that much, but well, I know
Now
what
I
happens
will.
in that place.
Yeah.
But what else happens in the place?
Right.
And so yeah.
That's really cool. GA is one of my favorite characters. I really like her a lot, and so I'm really glad that she's getting more screen time, as it were. And I am looking forward to reading that series very much.
She started off, once again, the first book I wrote was book 3 of Dragon Songs, and we had snow, which I know in Canada it's not a big deal, but here in the South it's like, snow, oh my God, see the world. We had 3 straight weekends of 12 inches plus, that's significant. Down here, it's like unheard of. And so I wrote like 150,000 words in 3 weeks, which I've never been able to replicate that ever. But in that story, she was just a very minor character, and just sort of saying, I have this world, which is, well, part of the reason why I wanted to write was to have a more multicultural world, because I grew up on the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings, Elric of Melbourne, try to say that really fast. So it was basically more Caucasian, and in Elric's case, very white people.
Yeah.
Elric was an albino. So when I first started writing, I actually only was going to write 3 books, and each would follow a different set of characters. And so that book 3 of Dragon Songs was one of the books. I decided I was going to start with the Asian side of it, because I watched lots of Japanese dramas and lots of Chinese wuxia movies. Like, I'm going to start here because this is something that you don't see a whole lot of, and it just grew, exploded from there.
Nice.
And once again, I never expected it to do that. But once again, Geo is just supposed to be a minor character to say, I'm taking a fusion of Western fantasy and Eastern fantasy. Because if you have a half elf, who says that the other half has to be white?
Right.
So she was there. But the thing was, I guess my first readers, my first friends who were reading, is like, this is my Dungeons and Dragons group from when I was growing up. They read my book, and they're like, oh, we like this character. Tell us more about this character. I'm like, oh God, and I have to come up with more about this character. And so she kind of became like a more central part of the story. And as the more I wrote her, when I actually started getting like real critique partners, then real readers, it's like everyone latched onto her. Like, no one likes the main character, not nobody, but everyone seems to like Gia better than the main character. And so she's the glue. When I say that all the series are twined together, she's in all the books.
She's that thread.
It wasn't my intention. This was never the original intention.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the glue that holds it all together.
Yeah. Which makes sense to me, because I don't know, she's really interesting, and she has a lot of
fun to write.
Yeah, that's good.
Bumping snark.
Yeah, no, totally. She's she's fun to read, and I am very glad that she's now in so many other stories. And I really hope to be reading them all soon. Right now I'm like trying to read books of each person I'm interviewing before I interview them, and since I'd already read 4 of your books, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to start getting ahead on the next books for other interviews, and so I'm working my way through those. And but yeah, I have big plans to sit down and read a bunch more Legends of Tuvara stuff soon.
I just don't have time to read, just like there's I mostly consume audiobooks now, just because that's what's convenient.
Yeah.
I'm driving now that we're not under quarantine anymore. I'm driving to my kung fu school and back, and so that gives me like 20 minutes to listen to something each way. And so I tend to be much more of an audiobook listener than I am an actual reader. So
there are a lot of people I know saying that. Like I've talked to a number of people who that's become like their primary form of reading as well. And I think that still absolutely counts as an actual form of reading. I don't think it's like a non-reading form of reading. Like, that's reading.
I absorb it differently. It's just like when we were talking about languages, what you visually absorb versus orally absorb. Orally absorb. That's it's a different type. It's a different type of story consumption. Let's say that.
For sure. But yeah, it's still. I mean, in my mind, it still counts as reading books. yeah, I think I need to start getting into audiobooks so that I can start like listening. I can start reading while I'm also doing something else. But
Exactly.
but I don't have a commute, so like I used to actually when I did cross country drives fairly frequently, I would listen to a lot of audiobooks then. But it's been a long time since I've been doing that, and now I'm like, maybe I should just start listening to audiobooks so I can, listen to audiobooks while I crochet or something and get back into a bit of crafting. But I don't, like, right now I'm not crocheting and I'm not whatever, and I basically just like from midnight to 2 a.m. I am usually reading. And then I'm working from 10 p.m. to midnight, because that's when the rest of my family's asleep and I can actually get stuff done. But wow, how did we? Oh yeah, that was just like sort of summing up like awesomeness about Legends of Tuvara. So anyway, everyone should go read your books if
Thank you.
if they want to read really awesome characters. And I think it sounds like they can start with any of the series and be on even footing.
Yeah, any book one, there's multiple entry points into the world. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so next up, going back to sort of a bit more randomness, if you could live anywhere in the world without the hassle of visas, etc., right? So like take out the annoying portion of borders. Where would you live and why?
I'm not really one. I'm kind of comfortable like with places I've been. I'm not an exploring type of person, so it'd probably either be Japan or Taiwan.
Oh, sweet.
Taiwan, Japan for the karaage and ramen.
Nice.
So.
We just hop back and forth between the two then.
They're close enough, right? Go between the two.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I was writing a scene with ramen in it last night, and was suddenly like just desperate for like real Japanese ramen instead of the couple ramen shops that exist in Winnipeg that are not.
They're not. Are they not good?
They're okay. It depends. Like there's one that's decent, and I've heard there's one that's really good, and I haven't had a chance to try it yet. But the problem is that when Winnipeggers tell me that it's really good ramen, I still don't know if that's accurate, right? Like it's like it's really delicious to them, but that probably just means that it's really salty. I don't know. Like I'm not sure. I mean, it could mean anything, and it could mean that it is really good. But it's probably not what I'm craving. Which is what I'm craving is like the tiny little ramenya tucked in the middle of nowhere in Sudoka, right? So anyway, so it's a different. I always have to adjust my standards for both sushi and ramen and
for sure.
So I'm with you there. That sort of like living places for food to me seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
I was just talking to Kay Lee Kenya Cooper this morning, and I was just saying how like if the crap really hits the fan in the U.S. and it's like, you know what, I'm gonna move, but it's kind of hard because I do have an acupuncture clinic here, but
yeah.
I told her it would either be Japan or Taiwan, because I could go to Japan because my wife is a citizen. I could go to Taiwan because my parents were citizens when I was born, so I could apply for citizenship if I wanted to.
Nice.
But then I was, I guess trying to figure out like which one would I prefer to live in. Great things about both of them.
Yeah, nice. Did you come to a decision about which you would prefer, or was it too hard? No, just like stuck.
Yeah. I think actually living in Japan, it was a great year, but there are so many things that were also negative that had to deal, I guess, with certain aspects of Japanese culture. I mean, they're very much all the awesome things about Japan are like the flip side of the coins of the bad things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's like, for example, all the harmony and everything. Well, yeah, there's harmony, but the flip side of that is that individuality gets crushed down. Yeah. So yeah, and if a thing has been done a certain way, that's the way it has to be done, even if there might be a better way of doing it. Which is interesting because it's like they can take an American invention like a VCR of the car and just make it so much better, but for some reason the process, like, no, this is the way we've been doing it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like, yeah, Japan is a land of juxtapositions like that, where you're like all this like amazing innovation and then like super traditionalism, like just like right next to each other, and I always think of the public bathrooms that had both a squat toilet and a like super duper Western toilet that would sing at you while it was wiping your butt. Like basically like in the
washing your
same,
butt.
like, right, yeah,
That's what I
well,
want.
yeah, it wouldn't
Okay,
actually
Japan
wipe
it
it.
is because I want to wash it. Damn it.
Right? Those are the best. Yeah. I mean, because like it will wash your butt and then it'll air dry it like with a blast of warm air. Anyway, that those two things would be right next to each other in the same bathroom, and I feel like that's a kind of a metaphor for a lot of Japan.
Yeah.
But at any rate, yeah, I that's it has a lot of wonderful things and a lot of not so wonderful things. Agreed. Oh, okay. This is actually another book related question. Apparently, I'm just like flipping back and forth in my notes here. But which of your characters is the deadliest?
The deadliest.
Mm.
Well, I would have to say it was the dragon.
Right.
But in terms of the main
Mass.
characters, it would probably be Jia. I mean,
Yeah.
she's pretty sneaky.
Yeah.
She can stab you in the back. She knows a lot of ways to do it.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd say she would probably the deadliest.
Cool. That would have been my guess, but you know, there are a number of books I haven't read, so I was like, I don't know, maybe somebody else.
Well, there are a bunch of the cast is expanded, and there are people with varying powers. But if this is the sort of thing is like if you pit one against the other, for example, there is this kind of Jedi Knight type of character, and one-on-one, yeah, he's probably the deadliest of the main characters. But she wouldn't fight him one-on-one.
She would know not to be there.
He would slip poison in his drink or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she holds that crown. That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving into back to random questions. What movie do you most often quote with friends?
I would think The Princess Bride is one of the big ones.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. Star Wars, of course.
Yeah.
Fight Club is another one.
Oh.
But probably the number one would be Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Shrek gets a lot of them too.
Oh yeah, there you go, for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely Princess Bride is the thing I most often quote with friends, but it's also a litmus test for friendship for me. It's sort of like if you can't quote Princess Bride, then we have to fix that right away and get you to see the movie. And if you see the movie and it's not something you want to quote, then I'm not sure we can be friends.
Exactly, we cannot be friends.
All right, that's solid. And okay, you said that like what are you reading right now, and what well, actually, so these are two separate questions. We'll do the first one. What are you reading right now?
So, on audiobook, I'm listening to Ryan Kirk's Nightblade's Vengeance.
Oh, cool.
Which is it's a prequel series. I don't know if you've read Nightblade before. It used to dominate.
I haven't. I've seen it for ages, and like I even remember back on K-boards, like Brian posting the cover art and asking for feedback and stuff. But like I still haven't. It's I think also been on my Kindle for a really long time, and I have not yet read it.
So I listened to book one of Nightblade, and I didn't really continue with the narrator. Didn't really actually. So the narrator didn't speak Japanese. So whenever he spoke a Japanese name, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
The new narrator for Nightblade's Vengeance, she has great. I mean, she gets the names right, except for Daisuke. She cannot get Daisuke right. She's like Daisuke. Anyway, she doesn't get it right. But other than that, all the names are like, oh, she's getting it right. And
Sweet.
The story is just so engaging. I'm like, oh, I love the story.
Oh,
it's
great.
right down my field, like sort of political machinations and stuff. So
nice.
That's what I'm listening to on audiobook.
Nice.
I'm reading Elizabeth Lim's Spin the Dawn, which is kind of a Mulan story.
Yeah.
Except it's like a tailor, and she needs to dress like a boy to become, or a man to become an imperial tailor. And so I'm halfway through that right now. And that's sort of one that I was reading, but then I put down because I heard about Everybody Lies. And so I read through that really quickly. And I'm back to Spin the Dawn. But I put that on hold again because one of my crypt partners, my amazing crypt partner, JC Nelson, has a book that I am doing an alpha-beta read for him right now.
Oh, cool.
Called I can't even remember what it's called, but it's a pretty cool story about like a tide that comes in, basically kind of toxic, and they have a character who needs to sort of save the day, I guess. So cool. Far it's a lot of fun. Nice. So that's my reading right now.
Very cool. I loved Spin the Dawn. It was one of my favorite reads last year, and I'm really looking forward to Unravel the Dusk.
It's coming out this week, isn't it?
Soon, very soon. Yeah. I don't know. It'll just be delivered to my Kindle. So I pre-ordered it.
Prior to that, I have to give a huge shout out to Luan G. Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Her book, The Glamorist, is the sequel to Vine Witch.
Oh,
This is a book, I mean, I would never normally pick it up. I'm not really a big kind of witch. I don't like stories about witches in general. They just don't turn me on a whole lot. But this was on Kindle's first reads like last year.
Okay.
And all the other fantasy choices were just like, So I just chugged it. And then I started, once again, listening to it. And I was like, Oh, wow. I mean, her writing is so evocative, and
Oh, cool.
decadent is another word I would use to describe her writing. I mean, the wordsmithing is just so brilliant. The
Nice.
creativity in the world building is great, and it's a
Yeah.
very compelling story. So I just really enjoyed Vine Witch, and then Glamorous. Once I had finished Jeff Wheeler's Weirwood series, that was next up. So I listened to the Glamorous last weekend. I binged that in like a day.
Oh,
So
very cool.
it was a really fun book.
Nice.
Mhm.
I will say, like, this has now come up, I think, maybe twice in the conversation in the last few minutes. Is actually one of the reasons that I don't read audiobooks as much is because a narrator that doesn't work for me can ruin the
Mhm.
experience. And then I'm like, did I actually not enjoy the book, or did I just not like the narrator? And I feel like it's not fair to the story. But then again, but like a great narrator can
I was gonna say some
yeah.
narrators just Emily R. King, she wrote the 100th Queen series, another series I really enjoyed. But
Mhm.
I actually started listening to that on audiobook. It was narrated by Lauren Ezzo, and
Mhm.
I just adored that book. I mean, the narrator I think really brought the story out.
Yeah.
And so when Emily came out with her other series, Beneath the Broken Star,
Yeah.
um, I read it. I read about 75% of the book in ARC form, and
Okay.
it was okay. I enjoyed it. It was okay.
Yeah.
But then I got busy, put it down, and then when I got back to it, I was like, I'm going to listen to the last 25% of it. And it was the same narrator, Lauren Ezzo. I was like, it totally changed the way I saw the story. And I
Oh,
went
that's
from
so interesting.
liking the story to just adoring the story. It was just so much
Wow.
better when Lauren narrated versus my voice in my head.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
Maybe it's because I hear the
Um,
women in drag in my voice. I have no idea. But but yeah, Lauren narrates it so much better than I do in my own head.
okay, great.
And the
That's
same goes if have you read Orconomics?
not yet. I again on my Kindle, waiting to be read. Have not read it yet.
If you want to listen to an audiobook, the narrator just knocks it out of the park. I
Oh,
mean, it
really?
is just
That's great.
the comedic timing. Yeah, some people do an amazing job.
Huh.
Phil Tucker's Empire of the Dead, once again, the narrator makes that story so much better because the narrator is better than what I read in my own head. The comedic timing is just perfect.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Very
some
cool.
narrators I think can totally make Will White's Cradle series, also one where the narrator just totally just nails it.
Oh,
So,
that's great.
yeah.
This is so cool. I feel like I need like a whole separate list of recommended audiobooks rather than just books that I want to read next. But again, like I default to just reading it myself.
Mhm.
But
I read a
uh,
lot faster than I narrate. Read a lot faster than I listen too. So.
yeah, there's that.
I even listen to double speed and I still read faster.
Oh gosh, I've heard of people doing that, and I have a hard time wrapping my brain around being able to listen like that. But I've never tried it, so I don't actually know. But I feel
Well,
like my
going back to the human brain and linguistics,
yeah.
our brain, we're basically our perception is constrained by our senses.
Hmm.
So like what we see slows everything down, what we listen to slows everything down. But for example, if you're, first thing in the morning, if you have a dream, you can
Hmm.
sometimes have a dream that feels like it's going on for like days or hours. But then
Right.
if you looked at the clock, it's like, wow, only 4 minutes have passed.
Right.
So I think our brain perceives things a lot faster, or can operate a lot faster than we are limited to by our
Fair
bodies.
sense. Yeah.
And so yeah, another interesting story with that from the acupuncture. I was once treating this woman to induce her labor. This is the first time I tried to induce labor by myself. Before in the clinic, I had
Yeah.
always had like a supervisor. This is the first time. And so I had her sitting down, doing this breathing exercise while I was doing her her acupuncture. And
Mhm.
she passed out. She fainted. I had to catch her so she didn't fall.
Ooh.
And she was out for like half a second. Her entire family was there and saw this. So
Right.
utterly humiliating. But anyway, she woke up and her eyes are fluttering like, oh, wow, that was like the best sleep ever. And I was like, how long were you out? And I was like, she's like, it felt like 8 hours. And I'm like, you were out for half a second.
Yeah.
So when you talk about
Wow.
dying, your brain taking 4 minutes to die after you've been beheaded, imagine how long that must stretch out.
Thanks for circling right back around to that. That's like
Yeah.
just to really just envision. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Although time like expands and contracts for us in different states of consciousness too, right? So like
Mhm.
hopefully our brain would take that 4 minutes and compress it. But
And if you're traveling faster than light speed,
maybe not.
apparently time changes as well. So
Yeah, right. Well, keep that in mind too. If your head starts spinning really fast. Okay, so that's an awesome list of things that you are currently reading and also have read recently. And now I wanted to ask, what if you had to recommend books, because I know like like one of the reasons that you and I hang out virtually is because we are both into promoting Asian inspired fantasy. And this is largely like, you know, me following your lead, but you were like, let's make a website. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. But
We
knowing
need to
that
get
that
back
is,
to that.
yeah, I know we so do.
100 hours in a
Coronavirus
day.
has happened. Yeah. And so along those lines, so everyone should also go check out our website, although it's kind of skeletal at this
Sparse right now. Yeah.
point. A little bit sparse, but we're working on it. But asianfantasybooks.com, I think, right?
Yep.
Right. Like, okay. But yeah, what if people want to start reading Asian fantasy books, what do you recommend? And then also like any other recommendations you want to make. But I feel like when we were talking before we started, that was a thing you said you wanted to be asked. So.
Yeah. So if you want to look at something at like very epic, not epic scale, but well, I guess it depends on the kind of reader, but Fonda Lee's Jade City, I think that's just a brilliant story in terms of the world building, the imaginative world building, the wordsmithing, the characters, just everything about it. It's just a spectacular story.
Mhm.
So Jade City would be one. If you're looking for like more of an epic scale, maybe I was about to say Empire of the Dead, but what is the name of the book? Daughter of the Empire, which is Feist and Wirtz. It's kind of like Shogun, the book by Clavel, but in a fantasy setting, which is once again a character who has no magic ability, no fighting capability. She's not a rogue, but yet she has to navigate her clan through upheaval. So that I think is a really good book.
Nice.
I think ML Wong's Sword of Kaigen is if you want to have your heart ripped out, squeezed, you know, ripped into several pieces, then pasted back together again, and Sword of Kaigen would be high on my list.
Yeah.
What else? Oh, for just fast, just pure enjoyment, Will White's Cradle series is just fun, very imaginative. Also, if an audiobook, just an amazing narrator. Yeah. What else? Oh, same thing in Shinsha progression fantasy. I like Eden Hudson's Darkening Skies, part of the Path of the Thunderbird. I haven't gotten past book 1 because it's the only one in audiobook so far, but I really enjoy that story.
Nice.
Let's see. Oh, what about you? Any excellent Asian fantasies you can think of?
Oh, well, one of my top recommendations I can no longer recommend, so that's problematic. But ML Wong's Sort of Kaigen is absolutely
Steel
a
Crow.
favorite. Yeah.
That's the one you can't recommend. Okay. That was on my reading list too. And I bought the audiobook.
I know. I mean, if you
I actually got it on your recommendation.
If you already own it, maybe listen. It's still a great story. It's just, and if you already paid for it, that was the thing that you.
There you go. I'm not. You know, it's basically fun. I've already funded him, so.
Yeah, exactly. So you just go ahead and enjoy it, because it really is such a good book. Yeah, but don't. Yeah, I would. Yeah. Oh man, what did I listen to, or not listen to? What did I read recently? Oh, my brain is melting.
I am too, because there's actually bunches of Asian fantasies that I've read. The ones I would recommend. I'm drawing a blank on them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Spin the Dawn. I am really looking forward to the sequel. I haven't read The Wolf of Orin yet, but I have it on my Kindle, and I'm.
Wolf of Orin, K.S. Filoso.
Yep.
I got that when it was I started reading it when it was indie, and then when she announced that it was going out traditional, I put it down, saying that I was going to pick it up when and I have yet to pick it back up. Which book 2? I think she just revealed her cover today.
September 22nd, is when it's going to be released. Yeah, I like bookmarked that. What else?
Yeah. I think Joan He's I'm not saying it right, but Descendant of the Crane. That's kind of a fun book.
I have heard of that, and I have not read it yet. I'm like, I have to look at my Goodreads to see what I've actually read lately, because my memory is terrible. What did I just finish reading? Oh, I read Thorn by Intisar Kanani recently, and
it's another one I started reading.
It's Middle Eastern rather than Asian, but amazing.
I started reading it when it was indie. Once again, announced that it was going traditional. I was like, I'll pick it up later.
Yeah,
I tend to read. I tend to read one chapter and then decide whether I want to keep on reading or whether I'm going to put it down right now and maybe come back to it or just give up on it. And that was one I was like, I read part of it, like I'm gonna get back to this.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna go trad. So
Yeah.
Evan Winter's Rage of Dragons is one of those that I love the first 2 chapters, but then he announced it was going traditional. Like, okay, I'll wait.
Wait.
And I have yet to, I have it queued on my audio.
Yep.
So
Yep. That one is also sitting on my Kindle waiting to be read. I own so many ebooks right now, and I am like, I have to stop
Same here.
buying books and I need to just start reading them and maybe do nothing else for like a year. Um,
Yeah.
I recently read Autumn Bridge. Have you read Cloud of Sparrows or Autumn Bridge by these are not indie, these are trad, but by Takashi Matsuoka?
No, I have never heard of them.
Those they're good. There are a couple things that I found problematic. There's a redemption arc for a character who's basically a sexual predator, and I'm not a fan of that. But a lot of it is really good, and that's set in actually it's set in the end of the samurai era and the beginning of the Meiji Restoration. So
That's a fun era.
Yeah, it's an interesting time period. So that's cool.
I actually, now I think about it, I have a novella. I submitted it to Tor and didn't get accepted, and I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it. But it's set at the end, like at the end of the Sengoku period, and it's like a yokai. Cool. It's kind of a yokai story about a doctor, actually, a Chinese medicine doctor.
Cool.
So, yeah,
that's pretty sweet. Yeah. That sounds really interesting. Did you submit that in the window? Like I know Tor periodically has open submissions,
yeah,
and that was that's a bummer they didn't take it. I mean, is it worth it to you to keep subbing it out, or would you just publish it yourself and roll it?
I don't know. I'll probably keep subbing it out a little bit if other opportunities come out. So why not? I guess maybe at some point I might try to self-publish it. It is kind of a fun story. I mean, if I just say so myself. I mean, it's more of a snarky, humorous story.
Those are always good. I especially, and I feel like especially now, I want more snarky humor in my stories. Completely not Asian fantasy. I have been reading a lot of T. Kingfisher's books. She writes what are essentially like fluffy romance novels set in a fantasy world. There are a lot of paladins. There are a lot of there's like a sentient badger people who like are upright walking badgers who talk, and there's like just all kinds of, but it's just like it's fun, and then the main characters are generally varying levels of snark and wit, and it's sort of all about human relationships and stuff, and it's really nice to read. There's also a fair bit of swordplay and stuff. The occasional beheading. There's actually in one of the books there's actually like a decapitating serial killer running around, and so it's fine. I still would call it a fluffy romance, but there's also with a lot of.
I think a lot of things are really coming to connecting here. So how's that knee pain?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. So, but anyway, it's. I feel like now, in particular, I want even more of books that are about snarky characters that are fun and not necessarily epic. And that's why I'm writing, like my work in progress is about that, among other things. It also ties into an epic plot, but it's like it's going to take multiple books for the more epic parts to come to light. And in the meantime, it's sort of a very close perspective adventure story with some very snarky characters. But yeah, so anyway, I say more of that, please. I would love to read that. So if you feel like publishing it, let me know. I will read it. I'll be there.
Excellent.
By. Yeah, any other recommendations that you want to make before we start wrapping things up?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
That's fair. I mean, I think we covered a lot. That's actually
that's
pretty solid. That's a pretty solid list. Well, we're at an hour and 15 minutes so far for the interview, which is solid. My last interview with Alicia went to 2 hours long, and afterwards I was like, who who is going to watch this? Like, I need to start making these shorter so that we actually keep our audience for the whole video. And so I actually, have been making more of a concerted effort to like keep us on topic. Also, you are much better at staying on topic than either Alicia or I. So that
Which Alicia was it?
It's helped. Alicia Wanstall-Burke. Author of Blood of Heirs. Yeah. And it was late at night, and she and I, like, well, it was late at night for me. It was night for me, and I was having a beer, and she was having a glass of wine, and we were. And
I was wondering if alcohol was involved, because my only experience with her is when she was a little tipsy, and I was like, she
was pretty much dead sober for this, but I think I was the problem, because when I have one beer, I just like start chatting endlessly, and I feel like every question I asked her, she answered, and then I blathered on about as if my input were somehow necessary for that. Like in equal measure. It was weird, and I feel bad about having drawn it out. But I say weird, but it was actually a delightful conversation that a number of people seem to have enjoyed, and Alicia's wonderful. So hopefully people enjoy it. But I looked at it afterwards and was like, I think I need to not have these be 2 hours in the future. So it's good. I think we're like an hour and 15, but anytime between now and an hour and a half, and I feel like we're in reasonable territory. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about? I'm trying to remember. I thought I had. Oh, actually, no. I wanted to ask you about your vegetable garden, because another thing that we have in common is that we grow vegetables in our yards. And of course, I live in Manitoba, and the growing season is wicked short. And you live in Virginia, and you probably got vegetables by now. I am like, I'm still watching.
We had our cool season. We've moved from cool season to warm season already.
Yeah.
So we start usually with like bok choys and leafy greens,
cool.
chard and that kind of things, spinach. So we grow those during the winter months. Snap peas. I love snap peas. And right now we're in squashes and tomatoes and stuff like that. So.
Cool. So you grow year round?
Oh, no, not year round, but Virginia's not that warm.
I was like, wait a minute, there's like an actual.
We can start some things like kind of in March, and we can grow them pretty much until October. And some things overwinter because we don't get super cold. So like kale and some things will overwinter pretty well.
Right, yeah. Even so I grow kale and Swiss chard, and both of those live well into like November here, which is extraordinary because they will have been snowed on multiple times by then. And everything else, it will be totally dead. But thank you. My daughter is tapping at her wooden workbench.
In Morse code.
Yeah. You know what, kiddo? I am almost done. If you can wait a couple minutes, I can come help. So like our kale and Swiss chard are like our heroes, because we're still eating those even after the first snowfall, which is always exciting because there's not much that lives that long here. And there's nothing that survives over a winter because even things that are supposed to be perennial, like mint or rosemary. And rosemary is like usually pretty hardy, but it gets down to minus 35 in the winter here, and that doesn't allow things to live.
Like, doesn't allow humans to live either. I mean, how do you minus 35? Jesus Christ.
I mean, you can dress for it. It's not very humid here, especially in the wintertime. And so you can actually dress for it. Unlike, like, I've lived in New England before, and you cannot do anything to keep that cold out. And if it got that cold in places in New England where I lived, I think I would never go outside.
Actually, the worst place I lived in the winter had to be Taipei.
Oh, really?
Because it's like it doesn't get much colder than like 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's so freaking humid. It just chills you to the bone, and it's unrelenting. Actually, I take it back. If the sun comes out in Taipei in the winter, it's like 80 degrees and beautiful, but then most of the time it's cloudy, overcast. It's like a basin.
Right.
It's changed since I've lived there because they opened up the metro, and so it's not quite as like polluted, and so I think the humidity has improved.
Huh.
Worst winters were in Taipei, I think.
Oh, interesting. Certainly, like the coldest I remember being during winter has been in like a combination of Massachusetts and Yamagata, because Yamagata, it only goes down to like minus 10, but minus 10 when you don't have an insulated house and it's very humid is really quite cold. And I'm saying minus 10 Celsius, not it's like
still too cold.
20 degrees, but yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
so, yeah. When I was in Japan, I thought the curious thing was that because there's no insulation, is like I could leave a glass of water out and it would be like a ice frozen on the top in the winter. Versus
yeah,
if I put it in the refrigerator, it wouldn't freeze over. I mean, so it's actually you could put things in the refrigerator to keep
to
them
keep
from
them
freezing.
warm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Japan was pretty
Um,
cold at night too. Now I think about it in the winter.
the handy thing in our house right now is we have this one storage room that's not particularly well insulated, and so all winter long we use it as a ginormous fridge slash freezer, because it gets very cold in there,
Mm.
and so we actually, like, all fall we will put beer in there and have like refrigerator cold beer just straight out of that room. But if you put beer in there in the actual winter, it will explode, so you can't leave it there. You can only put like actual freezer products in there in the winter. It's kind of hilarious. Anyway, we're also looking into just insulating that room properly, but but
Amazing what things.
for now it's a useful cold storage space.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, why worry about it?
Yeah. Okay. So what's your favorite thing that you grow out of your whole garden, or like top three? I don't know. It's like
So,
favorites.
so favorite thing because the actual process of growing, or because I like the taste of them, or
Either way, what's your favorite thing that you enjoy watching it grow, or because you really love the end product?
snap peas and asparagus beans. They're kind of
Oh,
like my favorite things.
nice.
I love the flavor of snap peas, that sweet taste of them. Asparagus beans, like basically yard long beans, they're a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Actually, asparagus itself, we do have an asparagus bed, and I love that one because it's like no effort whatsoever. It's just like every spring, oh, asparagus.
I've seen you say that before, but apparently asparagus, like getting it going, takes for freaking ever. But then once it's established, like after like the 5 years it takes to establish itself, but then it's like it just throws itself up at random. Did you have to?
Mine
Did you
didn't
have
take
to?
that long.
You
Yeah,
didn't take
mine
that
didn't
one?
take that long. No, we actually got it our second year. It was just started coming up, and
Oh yeah,
just yeah,
cool.
yeah.
It may be that it takes way longer here because of the cold winters, and you have to like take extra care of it, because maybe it's one of those things that, like, even though it's supposed to be a perennial, if you don't cover it when it's -35, it'll still die. I don't know.
Well, it should be deep, and it depends on how deep your freeze goes, because it should be like your base roots should be about a foot and a half deep.
It should be
So
how deep?
like 45 centimeters deep, and
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, the ground here freezes to like 4 or 5 feet. Like it's a lot. I know, it takes, and
And
then
you live there.
I know. Because like we get, the cool thing about it is that in winter we can go skating on the river. The river freezes with, like, at the very least you're like talking a foot, but there are a lot of places where there's like 3 feet of ice on the
Wow,
river surface or more, and you can just go.
that's amazing. Because
So we get,
we have to pay my kids ice skate, and gosh,
yeah,
it costs the money.
I know,
Let's go to
yeah.
the river.
Yeah, exactly. That's just what's
That's okay.
pretty sweet. This last winter, there was, the river froze early and then thawed and broke up and then froze again, and so we actually weren't able to skate at all because there was no way for them
Uneven.
to get the surface to work. But in a year where it freezes in all in one go, they'll actually Zamboni it. Like, they'll Zamboni this one river trail and clear it of snow, because of course otherwise there's just a bunch of snow on top of it. And so they clear it off and they Zamboni it. And so it's hilarious. You can watch the Zamboni just like driving down the river. And they'll take, and we have, like, I think the longest it's ever been has been like 13 kilometers. On
Wow.
the trail. It's really cool. It's so fun. And I missed it a lot last year. Like, I hope it freezes properly this year, because that would be a nice thing, especially with COVID being what it is. It would be so nice to be able to just get outside and go skating for a long time and not worry about it as much, because of fresh air and whatnot. So, yeah. Anyway, benefits to winter, but yeah, the downside is the garden becomes more problematic. We can't plant until late May at the earliest,
Oh gosh.
because there's still a very good chance of frost until the last week of May and first week of June.
Well, there are a lot of frost resistance, like cold weather. A lot of cold weather plants can survive that. So
Yep.
it's
Yeah. It's, I mean, yeah, we don't. It's like we can't plant our tomatoes and stuff. We could probably plant
Yeah.
the
Oh gosh.
kale early and whatever, but yeah. And I need to get my indoor growing game on stronger, because I don't we tried this year. I tried planting tomato seedlings, and like by the time it was time to plant, they were still only like this big.
Well, that's not a bad thing. One of the problems with indoors is that because they don't get enough sunlight for a lot of people, they get very leggy, like kind of long and not very strong.
This was, they did not, like, I put them in the ground and they just instantly died. Like they were dead in 48 hours. I mean, granted, part of that was because the weather did a weird swoop. Like I planted them when I thought it was safe, and then it was almost freezing at night, and then like not like 75 or 80 degrees the next day, and they just were like, nope.
Yeah, we got a weird freeze too, like in May, I think. Late May, we had this weird freeze come through. We never usually get that cold, and like in May, and it killed a bunch of my squash and tomatoes.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
My pumpkin is one of my favorite crops because we use it forever, and like it feeds, like I make pumpkin pie and pumpkin bread all winter long and well into the spring, and it's so tasty. And
we have a major issue with squash vine borers. It's
really?
I don't know if you have them up there, and it's kind of moth. And they lay their eggs on the vines, and they will come in and they will bore into the vine and kill the plant. So they're the bane of my existence. I love growing zucchinis and squash things. This year I'm planting kabocha, but once again, you deal with the squash vine borers. So far, so good. I mean, usually they're dying. Everything's dying by now, and it's not. So I think I've done a good job this year, which would be the first year ever that I controlled them correctly. But fingers crossed.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I hope that works out for you. It may be that here, because of the timing, because we can't plant anything until late May, early June, that we may miss a lot of that season. I don't know. It does work out for some pests. There's still something eating my kale though. That's an insect. That's not just the bunnies that have gotten into the yard, but I love the bunny, but I definitely want to relocate it. We finally put up some more serious netting around our low piece of garden. Most of our garden is raised beds, but we have one piece that's in the ground, and now we finally put up some serious fencing to hopefully keep them out. But okay, we are basically at the hour and a half mark here. So in the interest of keeping everyone's interest still close to the end, I'm gonna wrap this up. John, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for talking to me about all of these fun things. And again, everyone should go and buy all your books, because the 4 that I've read so far were fantastic, and I have a hard time imagining that the rest aren't as well. Yeah, thanks for being here.
And thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
You're very welcome. And I'm now going to hit end stream, and then and we'll still be here. But thanks everybody who came to watch. Oh man, I didn't even check comments for questions. Wait, hang on. Okay, we have a couple random comments, and somebody really loves the cover art on your books, but luckily no one asked any questions, so I didn't miss anything. Okay, so yeah, thanks again everybody for being here, especially those of you who came to watch live, and